Okay, welcome back, everybody. We're on to our next last unit, and our last official unit will be a recap so that you can get your final papers done. But this wasn't an original unit in the course when I wrote it originally, but it kind of came out of conversations with students about, how do we become a security manager or a security professional, supervisor, whatever. And so this is a very practical unit, if you will, and I think that it's something that, maybe you'll roll your eyes and say, why is he telling us this stuff? But I think that there are some practical questions that people have when it comes to getting a job in this field, and I'd like to kind of go over some of those, and hopefully they'll answer some questions that maybe you thought were silly to ask. But if you're going to be a security manager and you're going to get all of this education in corporate and or homeland security or cybersecurity, that's great. But at some point, you got to get a job. And networking is a big part of that. And we'll talk about how to go about networking. And then we'll have an exercise in doing just that at the end of the week. But first, let's recap last week. So last week, we had the G4S case, which I hope you found quite interesting. I think it is both an indictment on the industry and a wake-up call for the industry to say that we've got to do better, or someone has to do better. And really, is that someone, G4S and their competitors? Because they're not alone. I mean, they were the company that was named in this, but I think you could have changed their name with any large company if you did enough digging and found something very similar. So they're not unique. They're just big. So for a newspaper article, they were an easy target. I'm not saying that they didn't do things wrong, don't get me wrong, but I think you could substitute just about any major security company and even some smaller ones for the same problems, just at a different scale. Students in the past have said that, well, the problem is they're a monopoly. And they really aren't. But you will find people online that will come out and say, well, they're a monopoly. That's the problem. Well, they're using hyperbola. It's not, a monopoly is a legal term. And they don't, the industry is so fragmented, frankly, from mom and pop shops that nobody is a monopoly in security. There are millions of security workers in the world. And, less than 7 or 8% of them work for a company like G4S. That's not a monopoly. In both the U.S. and Europe, and other countries have other laws on monopolies, but I have not found any place where they or anybody really has a monopoly on the security industry. It's very fragmented. And it's a good company. G4S, you may work for them someday, and they're a good company. I believe that they are, but they had some systemic issues regarding the guard behaviors in 2019 that caused this expose, which they actually did react to and made a lot of changes. But it shouldn't have happened in the first place. So, companies hold some responsibility. It's called vicarious liability when an employee is acting in their official capacity as an employee in duties directly related to their job. So if I am a guard at a department store and I am an armed guard at that department store and I see someone shoplifting and I shoot them, I was in directly related to my duties, right? I was in my official capacity, and the company, G4S, and the department store probably hold some liability. If indeed I was an unarmed guard, and that was my job in that department store, and I shot a person, the vicarious liability would go down, actually, rather than up, because no one could have foreseen, based on the fact the person was hired and instructed to be unarmed, that they would have been armed. We also have to remember that people have free will, right? You can do what you do. The case of the G4S officer who became the shooter in the Orlando nightclub incident, they could have foreseen that he had mental issues, but they couldn't have foreseen that he would go in and shoot 40 people plus in a nightclub. People have free will. They do what they do. And as a client, if you are a client of a guard company, you can have contract language that can help protect you. Like you want to see the background checks of everyone. You want to have them redone annually. You want to make sure that people are properly trained, and you want to see the training records to prove that they have been. So you can put contract language in as the client of a company to force their hand to do the right thing if you feel that if without that force, they may not do the right thing. So really the lessons to take away from that are that government regulation, as you saw, was spotty. Some states do it better than others, but most of them do it pretty poorly. And even if they have regulations on the books, they don't have the staffing or the bandwidth to enforce those regulations. So realistically, as a client of a guard company, which many of you will be in your careers, you need to understand your contracts and to put in things like regular rechecks on backgrounds, regular training, regular screening, what the screening entails. You want to have an escape clause. So you can say at any time, you just need to pick up the phone and say, I'm sorry, but Johnny, the guard at the front desk, he goes now. Replace him. With or without cause, no explanation necessary. You need to have it in your contracts so that if you understand that there could be a liability, you simply just cut the ties. If that were your own employee in a direct hire, you wouldn't be able to do that, as you know. You'd have to go through, unless it was an at-will employment, but even then you'd have to jump through a lot of hoops with your HR people. But in a contract where you stipulate that you have full right to replacement, then you don't have to worry about that. Don't ignore warning signs. Somebody reports something to you, report it to the guard company, and then follow up almost immediately. You report, I had a report that one of your guards was inappropriate with one of the contracted housekeepers, as was one of the cases. It was more than inappropriate, it was rape in that case. But I had a report that he was inappropriate. Okay, we'll take care of it. The next day, what did you do? Oh, we talked to him. He said it didn't happen. Wrong answer. The right answer in that case would be we either replaced him or we moved him to another assignment somewhere well away from people, right? Don't ignore the warning signs. It's your responsibility to make sure that the guard company follows through, unfortunately. And don't expect you can prevent any issues. You will have issues when you have contract guards. Some of them, quite frankly, are funny. I mean, some of the things that guards think to do on a midnight shift would just blow your mind. But you can't prevent all issues. What you can do is protect yourself by having an escape clause, by putting in contracts that certain things need to be done at certain intervals so that everybody is protected. So on to networking. And what is networking? It is nothing more than having a circle of companions, friends, connections, and contacts that can help you and you can help them. That's your network. You have a network today, you just don't know it. If you are on a sports team, your sports team is part of your network. Your family is part of your network. Your friends at school and otherwise are part of your network. And if you were to draw out your network, you'd find they were connected, some of them in odd ways. A family member might also know one of your classmates. Not from you, but from someplace else. They maybe went to school at high school together, right? Your cousin goes to high school A, you go to B, you come to college. Somebody from high school A says, oh, I know your cousin, right? Those are the types of networks we're talking about. And networking is important because, especially as a security manager, because it keeps you current on legal and regulatory changes. It allows you to seek references on suppliers, prospective hires, right? People you're going to bring in, like those guards, perhaps. You stay current on new products and technologies. And if you don't stay on the cutting edge of the new technologies in our field, then someone else in your organization will, and they will eat your lunch. So you need to stay up on the new technologies. The new hires gives you an unvarnished view of those prospective new hires. We talked about prospective hires and suppliers for references, but you'll get an unvarnished view. By that I mean you get the truth. It keeps new job prospects open because that is why, realistically, you are all here. In my opinion, 99% of the students at Slippery Rock want to have a job when they get out of school. And so networking can help you do that. And it can provide a social outlet if that's something that's important to you, but that comes with some pitfalls that we'll talk about as well. So we did a unit on regulatory environments, and you need to understand the changes. You know that you need to stay current. And one of those ways is to get good intel from other people. You will be able to go to your employment lawyer if there's a new rule that says all guards in St. Louis, Missouri must now have a guard license. And in fact, in Jefferson County, Missouri, guards need to have their license and they need to have it on them. They have to go through a certain amount of training to get it. It's one of the more regulated places in the U.S. Let's say that changes and now they need to get a new guard card every year because the amount of training has changed. So they'll need to get a new license in 2021. Otherwise, they'll be out of compliance. And you, as the person who is employing that guard, would then be out of compliance. You may not get that from your employment lawyer, and you may not have heard of the new law, but somebody in your network may very well have heard of that. So an employment lawyer may be able to tell you, or an outside counsel may be around to do that. Could be somebody from the government, a regulator. In this case, I've listed regulators as good sources for regulatory changes, but in the case of the guard card incident, the guard licensing incident, or example rather, It could very well be somebody from the state police, because the state police and or State Department of Labor normally is the one who handles licensing of guards if it's required in a state. So they may be the one who calls you because you're part of their network, or they send a note out to their network saying, guys, don't forget 2021, everybody's got to have a new card. January 1st, we start inspections. Then you know to tell your guard supervisor, I want to see everybody's guard card before the 1st, so I can take a copy of it and put it in the file. The Society for Human Resource Management, SHRM, if you're not familiar with that organization, it is a huge organization, very good at employment law regulatory changes. They have a staff of lawyers that do nothing but scan for those changes. If you have a SHRM membership, or someone in your organization does, and likely your HR person would, partner with them so that you can get the legal updates they send out. As is International, is the largest organization for security professionals in the U.S. and, in fact, internationally. I think at last count there were about 70,000 members. ASIS sends out a huge amount of literature on regulatory changes, and in fact, as a member, you'll get their monthly magazine, which has a section on legal and regulatory changes. And then InfraGard, for those of you in cybersecurity, InfraGard is a very similar organization, and they too send out updates on legal changes so that you can stay up on regulatory changes through the use of this network, these people who you have made contact with before that are going to give you a heads up when things change. So how about references on suppliers? So, when you do business, you have a number of suppliers. It's much like thinking about your house, right? When you're at home, if you need a plumber, you call a plumber or you call an electrician. Now, sure, your parents or whomever may have done some of those repairs themselves, right? We all do, minor repairs ourselves. But if your home wiring went totally bad and needed to be replaced, it's unlikely that somebody in your home, statistically unlikely that somebody in your home would have the skill sets and licensing and materials to do that. So you really rely on supplier, an electrician in that case. And in the security game, we rely on a lot of suppliers. People who put our access control systems, our camera systems up. People who do side investigations for us. People who do background checks for us. We don't do all that ourselves. We use suppliers to do that. You want to make sure you have the best suppliers, and in order to do that, you need references. Without a network, it's very hard to get somebody who will tell you who's good and who's bad. They want to be, middle of the road. You ever used them before? Oh yeah, they're fine. I've heard of them before. If you have a network that's tight, they will tell you whether or not that supplier is good. Now, I had a supplier this was many years ago, of security guards. That company is no longer in existence. It was actually merged with one of the large ones. But they had something called a non-compete agreement. And they made every customer sign an agreement as part of their contract that said that if indeed we went to another guard supplier, another company to provide those people, we would not allow that company to place any of the current guards that work for the current company at our sites. And I went to a facility and we needed to make a change. The service was very, very bad. And so I brought another company in, and Company A enforced their non-compete. And I had to lay off 102 people and hire 102 fresh bodies because those guards were under a non-compete agreement. Had I known that, had I had good contacts, this was a long time ago, and it was a different city and area than I was in, but had I known that this company did that in that city, I would have never even entertained changing at that point. I would have waited till the end of the contract, probably. Or I would have told them, if you want to keep the contract, the non-compete needs to go away, and try to negotiate it out. But again, not having a contact not having anybody that I knew that used this company in that region that would have warned me, hey, they got a non-compete. If you change suppliers, none of those people can come to work for the new supplier. I would have known that 100 people would lose their job that day. Very bad day. Obviously, for them, more so than me. But again, when you don't know it, when a company, it really is a poison pill for their own employees. I think that's why that company didn't last, because that I believe to be unethical. But had I known it, it would have been easy to deal with. So you're using these suppliers, and one of the other things is that they all have representatives. So, a supplier is your electrician, but some electricians are good and some are not. If you have the same product but a different representative who sells it to you or services it for you, it can make a big difference, right? So when I need an electrician for my home, if I don't know an electrician, I don't have one that I've worked with before, I might speak to one of my neighbors who are part of my network. Who would you use? Oh, we used, Jim's Electrical Services. They did a really good job. They cleaned up after the cells. The rates were really good, and the work was impeccable. Fantastic. I've used my network to get a reference, right? It also helps with suppliers in the industrial setting to know whether their response times and their billings are accurate. Nothing worse than getting a bill from somebody after they've done work and have it be wrong. Especially in industry, it is hard to have them, you have to go back in, prove it wrong, you have to reissue. Sometimes bills are sent not directly to you, but they're sent to an accounts payable, as we talked about in finance. It's a mess. So you really want to understand whether those suppliers have the right billing processes in place to make them accurate and whether they show up. Now, the best sources for this type of reference are local contacts in your industry, other people who use the service, and procurement leads at other firms, because procurement normally deals with issues with a company. And if you know somebody in procurement at a company that's using somebody that you might use, you could call and say, hey, Jim's Electrical, what do you think? You used them? Yeah, we used them, and their bills were always wrong. They were always complaining about waiting to get paid because we had to stop payment because of their wrong bills. And then when they never showed up on time, you want to know that stuff, and your network can tell you that. So your network can help keep you current on new products, especially people who sell those products. So this is something, a part of a network that's underrated by many people in the security industry. I know everything. I don't need to know about new stuff coming out. Let me tell you, if you don't, somebody else will in your company, and you'll find, if you have a big enough employer, that somebody will put up a new camera system and you won't even know about it. You'll find out about it later because they found new technology, they wanted it, and they purchased it. And big companies are rife with things like that, where people try to get, it's like everybody gets issued an IBM computer at company A, but so-and-so likes an Apple, and they know they can go buy an Apple from somebody, so they do, and they put it on the network. Guys in cybersecurity know that the protections on the iOS platform are different than the Windows platform, and if you're not prepared with it, they've just put your network at risk. So you really want to stay up on technology so that you become the expert in technology for security. Now, it's okay to take demo-only meetings with these folks. These are sales, account managers, business development execs, they call themselves, sales reps. You can say, hey, look, I want to see this product, but I'm not buying. I'm not in a position to buy yet. So let's set up a meeting. You can do an online demo for me, or you can even come out and demo it. But I'm going to tell you right now, I'm just kind of looking at different options, but I don't know that I'm going to buy just yet, or I don't know if it's right for me. They do this all the time. In fact, some salesmen in this game get paid based on the number of meetings they take, not just on what they sell. I would suggest you always use local reps when possible, because sales reps have territories. If someone calls you that's outside your territory, you start a conversation with them, it alienates your local guy. So when you're dealing with salespeople as a security manager, you want to ask, am I in your territory? And I've been told a number of times, we deal with your headquarters, so yes. That's not the right answer. Territories are the guy who works for that company in your region. So let's just say you work in Pittsburgh and your headquarters for your company is in New York City. You want to deal with the Pittsburgh guy. A couple of reasons for that is that they will also be a much stronger member of your network, because they'll have local contacts that you can then connect with to network. So one more reason that we network, before we get to the one that really matters to you at this point in your career, is new hire intel. So let me tell you something about resumes. They are normally more lies than they are truth, and that's sad to say, and I say it with a grain of salt. Not everybody's is, but people tend to exaggerate in their resume because they're trying to get an edge. There's a reason they want to exaggerate. So if you worked on a project with 100 other people, you may say was key in a project to do X and save the company $1 million. Well, you provided some information to a team of 20 people who were working on this and came back with $1 million in savings. You were key because you were part of it, but you weren't the only one. But people do that all the time in resumes. If you know some past company contacts or someone who does, then you can get beyond what the standard is. Most people don't understand that when somebody calls for a reference, they only get certain information these days because of the number of lawsuits on people who gave out bad information on references because they had personal grudges to work on. Most companies, when you call for reference, will verify the name, the dates of service, the roles the person filled, and final salary. But even that's going away because most states now are not allowed people are not allowed to divulge previous salaries. And that's so that people don't, if you leave a job at 50,000, your next employer knows they can probably get you for 60, right? But if they don't tell you what you were paid before, they may say, maybe the guy was making 60, we better give him 70. They were finding that employers were kind of shortchanging people based on what they made before. So that's all you're going to get in that standard reference, right? If somebody calls and says, did Brian work here? And what can you tell me? His name was Brian Wisniewski, and he worked here from, April of 1987 till present. His roles were this, and terminal role now, final role is Director of Global Security. Final salary was this, where it's allowed. You want to know habits, work ethic, whether the person's personality fits, and whether they offer a value. You can get all that information. You want to know what their rules were. You want to verify that the resume was right when they said they worked at the place from 87 to 2021 or 2020, right? But you really want to know what their habits, you really want to know what they're all about. You're not going to get that from a standard reference. But if you have former coworkers who worked at companies where they did, ASIS members who are the security managers of the companies where they worked at before, then that network's going to give you that new hire intel that you really need. Off the record generally, but they will give it to you. And that's the importance of having a network when you're talking about new people coming into your organization that now become your responsibility. So now we're kind of getting into the part that I think affects you and affects you, some of you, pretty soon when you get out into the job market, right? So there's other things, understanding contracts, understanding how to deal with salespeople and things like that. There are some tips, I think, that I would like to give you. And one of them is job prospects is a great reason to have a network, right? We never know when our job's going to end. We never know when that dream job's going to pop up somewhere, and we want to know who to call to get the real scoop on whether they have an internal candidate, whether I have a shot at it, right? One of the things you always want to do, by the way, and I've got a few tidbits in here, always be ready with your resume. If you don't have your resume tuned up and ready to go at a moment's notice, I actually contacted a student last week and said, hey, I need a copy of your resume. Something popped up in my network, and I said, wow, I think this kid may be a pretty good candidate for it. I called the hiring manager and I said, hey, I got this guy. He's a long shot because he's just getting out of school, but it might be somebody you want to talk to. All right, have him send me the resume. When I called this student, said, hey, I need a copy of the resume, I had it in 10 minutes. If I had it in 2 days, that hiring manager may have just said, you know what, I don't want a newbie on this. I don't know whether the kid's going to get the job or not, right? I don't know if he's going to be asked to interview for a job. I do know that quick turnaround was very impressive to the hiring manager. And I also know that I got a wow back after he looked at the resume. And he is a Slippery Rock soon-to-be graduate. So always have it ready. Don't be scrambling to get your resume ready when a job prospect comes up or when one of your network members calls and says, hey, I think I got something for you. Same thing goes for the press suit, right? I call it the funeral suit. You should always have your interview clothes ready. I know that sounds silly, and you're like, what was he talking about this in this course for? Well, look, if you're taking a security management course, then maybe you want to be a security manager. And if you want to, you're going to have to be ready. So you should have a pressed suit or jacket and slacks. You should have your interview stuff ready because someone may call and say, hey, we're really hot to fill this position. We think you may have the qualifications. We'd like to get interviews, but we've got people going on vacation, so we're going to be doing them starting tomorrow. Can you make it tomorrow? And if your answer is, I really can't because all I got are sweatpants and jeans and, T-shirts that say Bud Light on them, you pretty much, stack the deck against yourself right away. So you need to be ready. The best sources for job prospects, in my opinion, are LinkedIn contacts, your former coworkers, which is a big one, and your local contacts in your ASIS chapter or your InfraGard chapter for you folks in cybersecurity or American Society of Safety Professionals, for those of you on the safety side. But those local organizations, LinkedIn and former coworkers, are the best job prospect people. Let's talk a little bit about that job interview, though, because I find it very interesting. There's a lot of research out on it, actually. So, you probably went through the last slide scratching your head saying, old Dr. Wisniewski is crazy because he's telling us, to have a suit ready for an interview. But I found this interesting statistic, and it just stuck with me. How important is a candidate's style of dress during the interview? And 52% of hiring managers said very important, and 42% said somewhat important. 94% thought it was important. 6% said not important at all or not very important. So your odds are 94% of the people that you will meet at a job interview will take note of what you wear. And I think that's a problem that the casual workplace has created. Candidates tend to come in dressed casually. You can always dress down, but when it's an interview, you should dress up. Okay? So, look, for what it's worth, there's some tidbits of things in here that if you really want to get a job as a security manager, these are some of the things you're going to have to think about and should be thinking about them now, so that when you form this network that we're going to start working on together, you're ready to go. So just an interesting tidbit there that, just because everybody else at Google wears T-shirts and shorts to work every day, and they do. I was on the Mountain Home campus of, our Mountain View campus of Google a few years ago, and I was the only one in a suit. But I probably would have looked silly in T-shirt and shorts at my age going to work, but no one thought less of me for being dressed more so than the standard as opposed to less so. So one more reason that people have, I'll call them professional networks, is for social outlets. And there's nothing wrong with that. You'll find that when you work with people, people become your friends. Most of you have held jobs and you've made friends at the jobs that you've been at. It's very common. When you get into the professional world, though, a lot of people get jammed up. And I think it's the number one way people get jammed up at work is confusing the social outlet with the workplace. I can't tell you how many times I've been asked, would you like to go play golf? First off, I will tell you that I've played golf a couple of times. I hate it, and I'm no good at it. So it's easy for me to say no. But others are good at it, and they love to play, and they normally would say yes. And there's nothing wrong with that. But a round of golf at a nice golf course these days can run $200. And if somebody takes you out 5, 6, 7 times a year golfing, they have essentially given you $1,000 in services to get you to buy something or to do something for them. Does that not sound like bribery to most of us? It does to me. So how do you get away from that? You don't want to say no to everything, so just pay as often as you play. I'll pay my own way. Or if you're going to pay this time, I'll get both of us next time. Always reciprocate, right? This is simple business skills. And again, I hope I'm not insulting anybody, but many of you have had questions about how to network and how to work in the workplace. And as a security manager, you have to be very careful of these things because for others, it may be okay to go golfing with somebody else who pays every week. But for you, you have to stay above that. Parties, cocktail hours, yeah, sure. Uber it because you don't want to be riding back after you've had a couple of drinks with somebody who is trying to sell you something or needs something from you. You don't want to be in their car for the next hour riding back as they start to put the hard sell on you. Holiday events, social outlets with people who are in your professional network, sure. As long as they're under control, they're not, big keggers, right? You're okay. Trade shows. Trade shows are some place that a couple times a year, especially in security. Some of you went to GSX a few years ago, and hopefully we'll have those again. And Slippery Rock students will be coming to those events. And after the day, most of the suppliers are there will have get-togethers, and they will invite prospective clients to these get-togethers. They tend to be rather large events. They oftentimes have decent bands and lots of food and drink, right? Just be a floater. Go to everybody's event. Don't just go to one. Go to one, stay for 20 minutes, talk to the principals, have a little something to eat and a glass of wine, and move on to the next one. Hop in your cab and go to the next one. It just keeps that professionalism and that separation. You've been there, you said hello, you did what you needed to do, but then you took off. And the last one is gifts. And this comes up at holiday time. Some suppliers especially will go overboard with gifts for people who have purchased things from them over the course of the year. I had a supplier once that I ended up spending about $1 million one year with, and they sent me a ironically, a golf driver that was like a $500 or $600 golf driver. It went right back in the box and went back. It was easy to do, first off, because I don't play golf. But second off, I can't be bought for a $600 driver. And neither should you. So as a security manager, you have to stay above that. Gifts should be nominal value. That's normally the rule. Some companies have a no gift rule. And if that's your company, that's fine. But think of nominal value if they don't have one. If it's something, a basket of fruit at Christmas or, something like that, that is normally acceptable in a business setting. Think $25, if you had to put a number on it. Something that's beyond that is really something that's inappropriate for a security manager to accept. So your social outlets sometimes become ways to try to get you to buy things. So I would suggest that your network be a little less social. Find your friends elsewhere. But if you make friends with people who are suppliers or others in your network, just make sure they're friends. I hope that was beneficial to you. I rambled on a bit, but these are the types of things that you will run into in an actual security manager job, and I want you to be prepared. So here's my own go-to list. This is my best network, right? Local ASIS members, and I've been in 3 or 4 different chapters because I've moved around a little bit, and I keep in touch with every one of those members. So if I need a supplier reference, if I need to find out whether a salesperson is going to sell me something good or some snake oil, I can call any of these people, and they will tell me. Resellers of things that I actually bought. If they sold me something and it was a good something, and I want to buy something else that they don't sell, I can call them and say, hey, I actually have a very good camera salesperson I work with as a supplier. And I will call him and say, hey, who do you know that sells gatehouses? Right? Because this type of business, you don't buy them very often. They go up and they stay for 20 years. And he will tell me, yes, go to this one. You probably want to stay away from this one. They tend to be expensive. And it'll give me good information. Part of my network, right? Presenters at anything I attend. Many of you are in the Security Studies Club or in other clubs on campus. If there are guest speakers, you need to network with them. They're there for a reason. And you have that opening because you can just say, is it okay if I, and we're going to talk about LinkedIn a little bit because that's the network I think that probably is the most beneficial, especially for people who are students. Is it okay do you have a LinkedIn account? Is it okay if I connect with you? They're always going to say yes. And if they're a presenter, then they are well known in their field and they're connected with everybody else who's well known in that field. And you immediately have that list of potential contacts, right? So anybody that presents, and I do that when I attend. Actually, now that they're virtual, I've attended a couple of the SRU speakers. I connect with them right away, right afterwards. I tell them, I just left your presentation. It was great. I hope we can connect. And they always say, of course. And they'll say, of course, to you. I go to former coworkers. I'll do LinkedIn searches if I need something in a specific field or a specific area. I needed to find a security manager for a site in North Carolina. I knew a couple companies down there, and I went and did some searches and found out who was down there and gave them a call and say, you know anybody looking for work? Because I knew that they'd been on the job for a long time. They were well respected, and we had some common connections if we weren't directly connected. But former coworkers, always stay connected with former coworkers, because if you trusted them and worked with them before, you'll want to know where they are, and likely they know somebody that you don't know that you might need to know to get your job done. Law enforcement contacts. Every law enforcement officer in the world has business cards. They hand them out liberally. Later in their career, they definitely hand them out because they're looking normally for security jobs. But if a law enforcement officer hands you a business card, you get connected with them somehow through a social network, or make sure you just stay connected with them. And then SHRM members, for me, again, that's been very beneficial. The HR people, I have a lot of HR contacts because we work very much hand in hand, and they can give me information a lot on new hires and people who are coming to my company from companies that they represent. So let's talk a little bit about something called a referral letter. And if you're trying to form a new network, so most of you probably don't have a long established list of contacts in the corporate, homeland, security, safety, cybersecurity realm, whatever your major may be, you probably just don't have this long list of connections, and you're going to need to start to form one. And a referral letter is one way to do that. if you have a mutual connection, so I may be a mutual connection, right? And you always ask your connection if you could use them to contact someone else and tell them who you're going to contact. And you could start with an email that says, our mutual connection, John Doe, recommended I contact you to ask for some advice on finding a job in the security field. What areas do you think I should specialize in? What areas of the country are most in need, in your opinion? Where should I be looking and at what level? Okay? You're not asking them for a job. If you're asking for a job with the person in your referral letter, you've missed the point. You're trying to build the network. If they have a job and they tend to like you, I'll tell a story in a minute on that, then it may work out. But generally, they're not hiring. If they're hiring, then they've posted a job somewhere. But when you contact them, say, give me some advice, most people in this field will answer you. It's very rare, actually, that you don't get an answer of some kind. And you're asking for advice on how to approach your job search or your job change search. That's all you're asking for, and they will come back with some advice. You now have that contact. You now have their contacts, really, right? Everything's connected. And you haven't asked them for anything other than advice. Some examples, when you look up referral letters when it comes to job hunting, some of them will say, always put a paragraph in that says, and so I'd like to have a informal interview with you next week if you're available on Tuesday. That's closing the deal. That's cheesy, in my opinion. Please don't do that. Just if you want to do a referral letter, find somebody, make a connection, and you're going to make some this week. Okay? And once you made the connection, if somebody says, okay, well, you can ask the question, who else might I contact that might be able to help me in my future job search? They may give you a name or two. Then you do the referral letter to that person to start to build a network. Now, the Josh story is an interesting one. I normally get hit on LinkedIn a lot from federal agents who are getting ready to retire and military members who are getting ready to retire. And Josh was a military member who was getting ready to retire. He was an intel analyst. Actually, he was counterintelligence. And he contacted me basically that he was getting out of the Army soon. And, he and his family were looking to relocate someplace in the U.S. He was in Korea at the time by himself. And if I had any information or any, if I could be of any help, he'd appreciate it. And I always answer those back, quite frankly, because I'm a sap, right? And I answered him back and said, sure, if there's anything I can do, just, let me know. I don't have any openings right now, but if there's anything I can do to introduce you to anybody, please let me know. And he came back with, that would be great. I'd like to meet, these people I noticed are your contacts. If you could do an introduction, that'd be great. And would you mind looking at my resume just to see if it's right? And I said, okay. And I looked at his resume, and his resume was quite strong. And actually, I said, this kid's got potential, right? He wasn't a kid, but to me he was. And as we conversed back and forth, it ended up that I was on the phone with him in Korea, and we were kind of going over interview skills. And then there was a job open with my company in another state from where I was. It was a different hiring manager. And I asked that hiring manager, hey, can you get this guy in the interview pool? He's not the right guy. You're not going to hire him. He doesn't have the skill set for this job, but I'd like him to have a real world interview. He's been in the Army for 20 years. He's not interviewed really in a business setting ever in his life because he went straight out of high school into the military, got his degree while he's in. And so would you do that? And they put him in the interview pool, and wouldn't you know, he got the job. He got out of the Army. He transferred to Missouri and started in a nice six-figure job right out of the Army. Now, that is the Hallmark story kind of version of how things work, but it is true. And a referral doesn't necessarily have to be a person that knows somebody. You can get a referral from common ground. Hi, James. I noticed that you are the security manager at ABC Company in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. I grew up in Johnstown and went to Johnstown High School, and I'm now at Slippery Rock. You've made a common ground connection. I was wondering if you might be mind connecting with me and giving me some advice on a future job search. You're not asking him for a job or an interview, just advice. But that referral can be on common ground. That's how referral letters work. They're kind of tricky, but they can be very good at getting you contacts. And we've got to start building everybody's contacts because at some point y'all are going to want to go to work. So let's talk about how we're going to do that this week. So this week, I would like everybody, if you don't have a LinkedIn account, to set one up if you're comfortable doing that. Now, I say if you're comfortable doing it because it is social media, and there are some people in the world that just say, I have no connection to anything social media. I don't think that's true of anybody in this class, because I think I've seen many of you have LinkedIn accounts and you've talked about social media in the past, things like that. But if you prefer not to do it that way, please contact me as soon as you do the lecture here and find out what the assignment is so we can assign you an alternative. But what you're going to do is set up a LinkedIn account, and then you're going to make 2 new contacts. So you're going to do some searching. It's a very easy thing to search, and you're going to search for either companies that you might want to work for, areas of the country you might want to work in. You're going to look for security people or cybersecurity people or safety people, whatever your field is going to be, in an area or a company that you might want to work for. And I want you to reach out to them in a cold call, if you will, through the LinkedIn messaging. And I even wrote a little script here for you, right? 2 people, field you're most interested in. Hi, whoever it is, I'm a senior or I'm a student, whatever my major is at Slippery Rock, I'm working to build my future professional network. Would be okay to connect with you and follow some of your posts, and those are your contacts. That's it. If they come back and say, yep, that would be great, thank them, and then ask them if they know of any other contacts that you might want to, consider that would help you, that might be willing to help you in the future. What you're trying to do is to build that network, that web of connections that you're going to need, and that I believe will be the thing that gets you your job when you get out of college, more so than the person who gets out and jumps onto Indeed.com or GovJobs or jobs.gov or whatever it is. I can't remember what the website is for government jobs. That takes a long time. You want to be setting this network up now. Okay, so that's what you're going to do. You're going to make 2 new contacts. Use LinkedIn if you have a LinkedIn account, or set one up, and there's some instructions on setting up a profile. You're not going to have a long list of things, of accomplishments to put in this profile. It's a very professional network. This is not the place where you put in pictures of your cat or tell everybody that you're really hungover, or that there's going to be you can't wait to get to the football game this week, whatever. That's not really what this is for. This is a professional networking app and social network. If you've not used it before, it's pretty easy to use, but you're going to find 2 new contacts. Now, if you can't find 2 contacts, then I want you to let me know that. I may be able to help you find 2, but I'm not going to do the work for you. If you can go out and do the searching, because you're going to need to do this when you start your job search too, right? Let's make 2 new contacts. Ask them if you can connect, because you're a struggling student and you might just need their help and their advice in the future. And I'm betting that you're going to hear back from these people. I'm betting that they're going to accept your connection. So the assignment then is to reach out early in the week, post your initial note, and any responses you get in the discussion board. It could be a single discussion board post if you like, or you can post your initial note and then go back and add it in later if you want. And then add a section telling us about the person. Why did you seek them out? What's their name? What position do they have with what company? And why did you pick them? Well, I picked them because I want to move to California when I graduate, and they happen to be a safety manager or security manager in La Jolla, California. I picked them out because I thought they had a job very close to one that I want to have, which is a good reason. Don't just try to reach out to the executive vice president of everything important. That's going to build less of a connection. Try to reach out to somebody beginning to mid-career if you can, in a position that you might aspire to have, in an area where you think you might want to work. Okay? Post that information to the discussion board this week. Okay? You're not asking for anything other than the connection. I also want you to think about connecting with each other. Okay? You're not going to be students for very long. You only got a couple of years left, most of you, right? If that. Maybe even a couple of weeks. And Facebook is what it is. It is very good for connecting with family and friends, and for, asking people, updating on, today I broke my pencil point. Yeah, that's great. Post it and you'll get 1,000 likes and whatever it is, right? But it's really hard to keep up with job changes that way, because when people get busy in their careers, they don't necessarily go to Facebook and do that. LinkedIn being a professional network, when you get a new job, it's one of the first things people normally do is they go out and notify people, and then you'll have a constant connection. And posing is a little harder on a career site like LinkedIn, because if you post that you are the executive vice president of important stuff at Ford Motor Company, I am sure that the real executive vice president of important stuff at Ford is going to call your bluff, because anybody can see your stuff if they look it up, if they do a search. So unlike lying on Facebook, where everybody is, pretty and strong and well above average intelligence, just take a look. Everybody's really pretty on Facebook. They'll tell you that. It's a little harder on a professional networking site to do that. So the posers are called out pretty easily. Again, you're not asking for anything. This is maybe a good source to build for internship connections and first jobs. That's why we're doing it. And I'm calling a lot of you out on your shyness. You got to step out of that comfort zone, because at some point you're going to be looking for that job. So let's start to do it now and build that network. So this week you have the lecture you just finished. There's some reading, which is pretty light, but it's about building professional networks. The networking exercise, 2 connections. Post the note you sent to them. If it's through LinkedIn, that's preferred. But again, if you're not comfortable with that, let me know early. And then let's see what you get back between now and, say, Friday. These are due on Friday, not Sunday. The reason is that we are coming up on finals week. I need to get a lot of stuff done and graded and into your records before we get close to finals week, because that's going to be a quick turnaround. So Friday, no responses due. Just the networking exercise, and post it in the discussion board that's set up. With that, have a great week. I expect to hear from some of you on what am I supposed to do? That's okay. If you need to do that, I'll put out announcements to the class if there's any big questions. But with that, have a great week and network with some really great people. I'm looking forward to see who you network with.